was solid. I got 2 CrossFit sessions in Saturday and Sunday morning. I plowed through a lot of research on semiconductors. I was playing around with AI to help me process 500 pages of research. I was prepared for a nice, peaceful sleep, and then 60 minutes had this piece on FTX, which raised my blood pressure. How was your weekend?
My weekend was pretty good. I went out to the country. My in-laws have a place out there, and it's beautiful, very relaxing when you don't see any houses and you just see skyline, which was really, really nice. And then came home on Sunday and just try to get organized for the week. So it was like, how do I make sure I know what I'm doing next week? Do I get in a workout? Help my kids get all their homework ready for the week. And,
that moment to organize your thoughts for the week on a Sunday evening, I do the same thing. That's a high impact move. I like that a lot.
It is. We started a weekly family meeting on Sunday nights. And the only reason we're getting any attendance is we've properly named it the most annoying meeting of the week.
Oh, that's funny. You call a spade a spade. I'm not trying to.
Yeah. And, my kids hate it, but, it helps a little bit to just say, hey, by the way, you have this on Tuesday night, you have this on Wednesday. And at least for 5 or 10 minutes, they pay attention.
My wife and I need to do that. This whole idea of you go on a walk, your significant other, but then you also have a separate, which is like your date night, and you separate the logistics and planning from the date night. We did that for all of like 2 weeks, and then like life got in the way and things happened. But I like that. Actually, I want to get a virtual calendar and put it on the fridge that integrates with all of our calendars, so we can put all our obligations and commitments. Kids got to go to swimming classes. Ron will be in New York to help there. But I like that.
I have the digital calendar downstairs. The adherence to the digital calendar is not excellent. We have, you can email things to it, and you can integrate it very well and color code it. I found after a full year of having the digital calendar that it wasn't as good. So I just went, and my wife was like, where are you hanging this? Because I got like a 40 by 24 acrylic clear month calendar where you can like write in everything. And you have to maintain it and like erase it at the end of the month and start a new one.
Funny. So I got a physical calendar, and when there's no adherence to it, so therefore I'm suggesting we go to the digital calendar. And of course, no one's going to use that either. But part of me just wants to see from a consumer experience what it means to interact with a digital calendar in the household. Just like I want to get the Ray-Ban glasses and never use them again from Meta or whatever other, Gen 1 device I can purchase and then quietly put away.
Yeah, I think, to your AI point, you've been talking about AI assistants. I think that's the next breakthrough that we'll see a lot of adoption around, which is if I could just tell an AI assistant to put something on the calendar.
Yes.
And know that it would get booked. Like I know I can talk to Siri and say, hey, give me a reminder, do this. But sometimes when I say that, it becomes a calendar invite. Sometimes it becomes a note. Sometimes it becomes a reminder. And so the intelligence and the logic behind the system is not where I need it to be. So I can have confidence that I'm just booking it. And then if I have the AI, I can probably ask things like, is there a conflict with that? When could I book that differently? Things like that. That's where you'll get a level up.
Oh, yeah, I can't wait. I think inside 12 months. No, I agree. When we shift from humans prompting AI to AIs prompting humans, then we know we're starting to see the benefit of AI in our lives. This whole prompt engineering thing just means we have a bad user experience. But I know we got a few topics. So Justin and I totally show up to these with zero to no prep. We had a 1 minute call before, and we throw out a few topics that we both have interest in. One was this Economist article, Living to 120, Health and Longevity. Want to talk more about that. Workout routines. Justin's longevity podcast, I listened to it this weekend. It was awesome. I want to get into that too. It's an interview with a trust and estates planner that specializes in ultra high net worth. This is beyond your run of the mill estate plan. This is against jurisdictional risk, hedging against U.S. risk, and specialized in digital assets. That was very interesting. We can talk about some of the highlights there. Sam Altman has bets on crypto, AI, and nuclear. I realize that Lumida has bets like that too, although we express them completely differently. So those were some of the things. We'll see if we can actually get to here, but why don't we dive in? Shall we start with, and then we'll get the FTX thing. God damn, the FTX SBF thing. I wish this thing would go to bed. Why don't we knock that out real quick and move past that one?
Start there. So you said your blood pressure was raised during 60 Minutes. Tell us a little bit about that.
I'll give you the summary. So Michael Lewis, acclaimed author, nominally nonfiction, really fiction. He just released a book, and 60 Minutes gave him a platform to talk about it. And in this interview, he says, FTX, if only they didn't get quote unquote negative aspersions, presumably from Binance, they wouldn't have had a run on the bank, and they would still be in business because they're making tons of money, which is total BS. And it's it's just it's absurd, and it demonstrates a lack of understanding of what actually happened with the FTX, and also just a deeper misunderstanding around how those businesses work. So, that's been trending on Twitter. There's a lot of discussion around that. I already have a tweet on that, so you can look at that thread. I thought we put the nail in the coffin in the fact that SBF and FTX, one, they had a money-losing business as early as 2021. That was driven by incompetence. Two, the fact that they were losing money led them to make a bad decision called engage in fraud. And that's why FTX as a business raised $2 billion, but actually incurred $10 billion in losses. The delta is called customer funds. So anyway, I think my blood pressure went up just a little bit more a moment ago, but.
Yeah, mine would have too had I tuned into 60 Minutes to hear that.
I don't think anyone tuned into 60 Minutes. I just saw this on. Does anyone tune into 60 Minutes now?
But presumably somebody. I don't know. I don't know what Nielsen ratings do these days with streaming, but that's wild.
I think Laura Shin will correct the record. She'll have a better book that comes out. It's not a book worth buying.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. So how about the Economist article we both noticed and wanted to talk about? Living to 120. Cover of the Economist. Actually, I've got it right here. I was reading it over the weekend in the home office. Thank you. Yeah. Thinking about this. What I thought was really interesting, there were a number of sections in this issue about this topic. It's really interesting to think about how most of the gains that we've had to date in the longevity of the human species are related to disease control, right? Better treatments of diseases, enabling us to stretch we're not expanding the lifespan of humans per se, as much as we're getting to what our achievable lifespan is more frequently. So therefore driving up the average life expectancy. And now what they're talking about is what people have been chasing for, millennia, is the ability to actually extend true lifespan potential through certain types of behaviors. One we've seen work out in laboratory animals frequently, which is calorie restriction.
Right.
But then the big talk is, calorie restriction's great, but really hard to do for humans. And so what can you do? Can you create medicines, if you will, that replicate the same type of pathway effects that
AMPK stimulation?
Yes, to be technical. Good call out. And so that's the question, right? Like, can we achieve that? And what did you think based on what you read?
I thought it was, I didn't get a chance to fully read the article. I just scanned it a moment ago, but right. So the one thing we know for sure is that calorie restriction promotes life extension. And then how do you do it? Of course, intermittent fasting is one. I do that. I haven't had a meal yet. It's 1:30, and my last, I'll have a a late lunch or dinner. So, that works. 2 is full on fasting, which, as you know, Dr. Peter Attia, whom you and I both read his book and big fans of his podcast, he does quarterly, maybe even monthly, like a multi-day fast. That's 2. 3 is prioritizing protein, which encourages satiety, is another one of these tactics. What else on calorie restriction? Oh, here's a fun one. This is a little bit more technical too, but there's this compound called rapamycin, right, which has been shown to extend life in like canines. There's actually a trial for canines now. So Dr. Attia and others, like I think Jocko Willink and Tim Ferriss, are on rapamycin. It's not approved for this. It's an FDA-approved drug, but they're using it for off-label usage. And what it does is it suppresses the stimulation of mTOR. This is going to get which is the short term for mammalian target of rapamycin. Mm-hmm. So 20-minute digression we're going to skip for now. But like when you exercise or you eat food, you trigger mTOR, which is an anabolic process to build muscle. And then not eating, calorie restriction, is the opposite of that. And you go into cellular recycling. And in fact, that Economist article talked about senescent cells, which are these dead cells that are no longer functional, which promote inflammation, which is a background condition that when it interacts with other issues like prediabetes, et cetera, then bad things happen.
Yeah. So the key that they're talking about and where investment dollars are flowing and a lot of energy is focused is how do we create, medicines or supplements that trigger those types of reactions in the body so that we don't have to only rely on the behavior change of calorie restriction, which some people it works for and some people it doesn't. Like I've tried it before. When I run out of fuel, I crash. It's hard and I work out pretty hard. So I tried the fasting and it just doesn't always work with me. I get kind of lightheaded and I'm like, oh man, this is not working. So I need to eat. But having something that deals with the rapamycin or the sensite cells through medicinal intervention would be amazing. One of the things I noted in the article that I had heard but hadn't fully appreciated is because these trials are taking place, or I guess the question would be, why aren't these trials taking place in humans? Well, in the United States, according to the Economist article, age is not a defined disease, if you will, that permits human drug trials. So we've got like this structural blocker to creating these trials that would enable drugs that are targeting this type of decline, age-related decline, from being run through human trials. However long those trials would take and all the other kinds of things downstream second-order effects, but we're getting blocked.
Right. Well, part of this goes to the fact that our healthcare system is focused on treating diseases after they present themselves with symptoms as opposed to earlier, prevention. And things like cardiovascular disease, atherosclerosis, diabetes, these are building up over 10 to 20 years. I mean, they've done autopsies of folks in their young 20s and late teens, people that have like motorcycle accidents, and they can see signs of plaque buildup. This is not one of the things. And the guidance and standard of care doesn't even look at advanced lipid analysis or getting a calcium score well into your 40s. So it's hard to have a behavioral or diet intervention until you're well along the path.
Yeah. It's speaking of the podcast, I do have 2 interviews coming up in that vein, one with a concierge doctor and one with a concierge wellness coach, and discuss those topics with both. So interesting things that come in the future on that.
You get into tactics or adherence strategies that we can apply in daily life?
Yeah, we did. We talked a little bit about tactics on the wellness side with the nutritionist. There were a bit more tactical implementation discussions. I think one of the keys that I learned from that, Her name is Jay Berman, and she's, worked in a number of Silicon Valley nutrition / wellness focused startups. Her takeaway was that it's hyper personal, not just like the prescription, but the actual follow-up and implementation, because somebody may have great strength training, right? Like you may be really good about going to CrossFit on Saturdays and Sundays and building up your strength, but you're not doing enough to do zone 2 cardio, for instance.
Right.
And so giving you a generic set of prescriptive tactics might not work if you're already really good about some of these things. Then we need to focus in on the areas that you're deficient. And then it also becomes, what's your method of communication? Like, do you like texts at 5:30 in the morning because that's when you're up and working out? Or do you like a weekly email to say, hey, did you get in your 4 workouts? So it's kind of a dynamic process between the coach and the recipient.
I totally get that. I totally, like, if someone told me to go run for an hour, I couldn't do it. I'd be bored, just the monotony of it. And there's also this personal biology component as well. Some people are slow caffeine metabolizers, for instance, and there are certain genes that appear to be indicated to metabolize certain fats. And, some of these centenarians, they have awful diets, they smoke, and they have bad lifestyle choices, but they're still centenarians because they're genetically gifted. So it's interesting finding that personalized strategy to drive the results. Makes a lot of intuitive sense.
So that's actually how I met Jay. So I have this water bottle from a company that I don't believe exists any longer. It was purchased. It was called Habit. And the idea was that they took a blood test. You took a blood test, submitted the results, and they analyzed what you should eat based on your maybe phenotype. I'm probably getting that wrong from a medical perspective, but it told me, for instance, you process this type of fat better than this type of fat. These types of carbohydrates aren't good for you based on your body type and your blood type. So that was one of my first introductions to this kind of personalized nutrition approach.
I would love to learn more about that. I'm an early adopter of all sorts of interesting tests like that give you feedback. And now, of course, the cost of doing full genetics analysis has dropped, right? It's like $250. You get a real DNA analysis. 23andMe is a shortcut. It's approximation. It's not terribly, accurate. It's useful, certainly entertaining, but no, that's exciting. By the way, one last point on the fasting part. I know you tried it out, and I had a similar experience. I'd have that bonk, that low energy, and suddenly start getting irritable, and then this imperative to start eating food. But when I first started fasting, inspired again by Dr. Peter Attia and what he'd been doing there, and Tim Ferriss has great podcasts around this too. And I got through that, and how to do that, maybe a good topic for another time. Once you get through that, then those issues went away. And part of what's happening is at the mitochondrial level, the mitochondria, the power plants of the cell, they're either metabolizing glucose or ketone bodies. And it takes time, measured in weeks, to turn over your mitochondria so they can start to metabolize ketone bodies, which is what happens when you metabolize fat. So now I know I'm not hungry. It's 1:30, skip my lunch. 5 years ago, before I did this, at 11:30, and I'd be hangry. I have distinct memories in my life of being hangry, actually, like long drive, like, can we get some food? I don't have that anymore. So there's something about the metabolism and adaptation as well.
Yeah, no, I think that would be a great topic. I'd love to hear more about that on another one of these conversations. I would ask you to think about, and I'm not saying which is the right way, but was it working better for you, body composition wise, perhaps, right? Like, so yes, you're able to get through that fast, and maybe your mindset and you've gotten more discipline, or you've been able to get through that mental barrier. Has it also been a benefit from a body composition standpoint that you're getting the results you want?
I need to do these DEXA scans so I can definitively answer that, but I might be able to share. Yeah, exactly. I might be able to share some highlights there.
So what's the workout routine, by the way?
What is workout routine? So I am a member of CrossFit. I've tried all sorts of workout routines, by the way. So right now I'm doing CrossFit. I like CrossFit because one, the coach and it's a group setting. I think you get more out of a workout with a coach or in a class versus personal accountability where you're like, oh man, you really push yourself, pat on the back. I think you're good now. No. When you've got a coach or in your class, by the way, my class, there are people that are 10 to 20 years older than me, men and women, and they perform well and they kick my ass. And that's inspiring. And I'm like, I better show up. I better give my all. And that's a source of inspiration. So, it's a CrossFit. It's a lot of metabolic conditioning. There's heavy weights, there's cardio. I like all of those things, heavy weights for the reasons we know, bone density, combat muscle loss. You can build these your muscles are glucose sinks, so you can tolerate glucose absorption better. And then, of course, metabolic conditioning for all the reasons we talked about earlier. So I think it really is it's an ideal kind of workout. The question is, do I get enough zone 2? I don't think I got enough zone 2 this weekend, but I got zone 5.5 in this weekend. How about yourself? What's your workout, Justin?
So I had been a CrossFitter, so I did that for about 8 or 9 years. And I did love it at the time, and there's still a draw to do it. However, when the pandemic hit, I built out a gym in my basement.
Oh, nice.
And once I did that, I just changed my routine to working out at home. So I'm up generally at 5 to work out 5 days a week.
What time do you go to bed, by the way, before you wake up at 5?
10:30.
Okay.
If I get to bed too late and it's tougher to get up, I can do it, but it adds up.
So
I found that 6.5 to 7 is good for me.
You're doing Jocko. Jocko wakes up at 4, but Jocko's inhuman. Waking up 5 a.m. and working out is close to Jocko, though.
Yeah, Jocko's an inspiration, that's for sure. I when I don't want to wake up, I usually hear his voice in my head saying, everybody wants to stay in a warm bed, get up. So I don't hit snooze ever. I'll make a decision the night before. Am I going to be able to get up? Like if I, for some reason, am, wired from late caffeine or something like that, I'll be honest with myself. In the past, I haven't. So that's a change in behavior. In the past, I would try to push through and I would do it. And then I would crash on the weekend. And now I've realized, hey, if you're up too late, turn off the alarm, which is not Jocko. He would be up no matter what at 4:30.
Right.
I've learned that I'm a human. I'm not capable of being a Navy SEAL. So
right.
I take my approach, but I still am up generally at 5 and working out. And now that I've read Outlive by Peter Attia, I've integrated more zone 2. So I do 3 days of the zone 2, which again, I don't yet know whether I'm in zone 2 because I haven't done a max heart rate test. So I'm kind of guesstimating, and I do that. I row for an hour when I do that.
So you got a rowing machine.
Yeah, I have a water rower. So I row for an hour.
So how many meters is that?
I never even look. I just throw on a TV show I want to watch and just row for an hour.
I mean, that's got to be over 10,000 meters. Next time, let me know. Wow, that's rowing is intense. We do that regularly in CrossFit as well.
Yeah, that's when I got into it. Was CrossFit, and I like it. So I bought that machine. I had bought that prior to building out the gym, but then I expanded the gym, and then I do weights 2 or 3 days a week where I focus mostly on big stuff: deadlift, squat, pull-ups, push-ups, dips. I don't have time for arm curls.
I prioritize legs and back, posterior chain, lats. Makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I try to do the zone 5 where you're 4 minutes in, 4 minutes off. That's the most mentally taxing thing for me to do. Is that
interval training? What's that one? Okay.
Yeah, that's the interval training where you're raising your heart rate for 4 minutes and then you're pulling it back down for 4 and then bringing it back up 4 times. And that's mentally taxing for me. Like I can go row for an hour. It's easy. Like I like that. I like watching a TV show while I'm doing it. And I could probably hold that for hours.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't have the time in my life to do it, but I can do that for a long time. Weightlifting is easy for me. I've always liked it. Like full out exertion and then pulling it back.
Training. Yeah.
I don't even want to do it. Like that's one of those things where I have to have discipline to do it, because I say to myself too, oh no, just don't do it today.
Interesting.
Do a different workout.
See, I couldn't do the 1 hour row, but I could do the interval training. And by the way, there's a type of gene that it's like a type 1 versus type 2 muscle. And one is oriented towards sprinting and one is oriented towards endurance. Hypothesis might be you have that endurance one, I've got sprinting one. Now, by the way, genetics aren't destiny. All these things are adaptable, and don't let that impact your psychology. It's all really habit, and you can do whatever you want to do.
It's the 4 minutes that's the challenge for me. I like sprinting.
Oh, funny. Oh, I see.
But when you say you have to do it for 4 minutes, it becomes like really, and especially because I only really do it on a rowing machine. So like my legs are burning and I'm just like,
oh, wow. I love intervals though. Like that's, and you know, the studies show that it's the highest return per unit of time. It's the most efficient kind of workout. If you get 15 minutes and you do intervals, you're getting like 25 minutes of something else.
Yeah. Well, to that Economist article, I'm trying to live to 120, I guess.
I think we all are. And we'll come back to that later time. I know we're looking to interview a biotech hedge fund person. There's so much on the longevity side and what's coming down the pipe. Like things are looking good for those that want to live longer and better. What else? By the way, I thought it was really cool. Your podcast with Matt McClintock, there's a scene where there's a couple, they're going through divorce, and then the husband passes his wife this USB stick and says, here's your Bitcoin. There's 10,000 Bitcoin. And her jaw proverbially drops to the floor. And, they realize that they've got, I think, like $300 million in value, and they don't have an estate plan. And they're getting divorced. I mean, it's a wild story. I recommend folks check it out. And again, this is like high-end wealth estate planning, super cool stuff.
Yeah, it was wild because he just said, hey, here's your half
of
the estate. And she's like, what is this?
Well, the USB stick didn't get lost on a boat in the middle of the lake. First off, high integrity. There's a lot in that anecdote.
Right? That's true. Yeah, it could have gone very differently had somebody not wanted to handle it appropriately.
Right.
But wild to think about that. And it does have a lot of downstream implications for everybody, because you think about all of the assets that people will have in the future to plan are very different than the assets of a generation ago, where you had your paper documents and like that was the file that you needed to keep track of. We're kind of in that midpoint where we're still digitizing real world assets, et cetera. And in a generation or so, it's going to be all digital representations, presumably, of even real world assets will be tracked in the digital form.
It's such a key point. And one of the points he made was the importance of title. So you have Bitcoin on USB stick. So who's it titled to? You individually, the household, the kids' trust, and people take these for granted.
They do.
Yeah,
they do.
It's definitely worth a listen.
Creditors won't be in the future taking it for granted, though. They'll be concerned about that.
Right. What else? I thought Sam Altman, that also came to mind too. So in the All In podcast, someone raised the point that Sam Altman may be the first trillionaire because of 3 bets. One is on nuclear, another is on crypto, and another is on AI. And I thought to myself, said, gee, we here at Lumida have also these 3 bets, but we're doing it differently. And let me share my compare and contrast.
Please.
So Sam is betting on nuclear fusion. And one of his statements is the cost of energy and compute is going to zero over time. He expects fusion to Well, I can't invest in nuclear fusion. He gets in seed stage deals, so I'm not doing that. We're betting on the nuclear renaissance, which is the bet on nuclear fission. We talked about that in the Lumida newsletter 2 weeks ago. I was on a podcast with Howard Linsden, Trends with Friends, that talks more about that thesis. That was one. The second is digital assets. We have a thesis around digital assets. He's creating digital assets. So once again, he's seed stage. He created WorldCoin. Look, if you can pull that off, you should go do that. We're trying to find the next Ethereum, and we're sourcing early stage venture funds that we believe have a credible track record and they can go do that. So that is our approach. And then on AI, so, our view has been on the silicon layer, bet on CapEx receivers, not CapEx payers. OpenAI has about $1 billion in revenue. They spend multiples of that on silicon. That means hardware, infrastructure, the cloud infra companies, the CoreWeaves of the world, NVIDIA GPUs, you name it. So we're betting on that. He's betting on the application layer, which is software. But that's actually a good bet if you're seed. But I wouldn't bet $90 billion valuation on that. So we have the same headline themes, but we're betting completely differently based on our competitive advantage. He's at seed. He can create his own outcomes. On the other hand, I would say when it came to say commercial real estate, we'd run circles around Sam. There's no way he's getting, New York City institutional grade private credit deals or commercial real estate kinds of opportunities that we traffic in because of our network and our expertise.
Yeah. I would say pulling it back to the most interesting aspect of that from my perspective is that not long ago, my children, I have 2 boys, 8 and 11, they asked me, who did I think was going to be the first world's trillionaire? And I said Sam Altman, actually. Probably because I had just listened to his podcast interview with Lex Friedman and was thinking about that. But I said, it's either going to be Elon Musk or this guy, Sam Altman. And I started telling them why. And they had known about ChatGPT. And as soon as I said he's the person who runs the company that created ChatGPT, they both said, oh, yeah, that's it. That's who's going to be the trillionaire. So their gut instinct was that.
Yeah, it's a really interesting. Jensen could be another contender, CEO of NVIDIA. I don't know what his shareholding of NVIDIA is. That's a really interesting. Oh, look, I like those themes. He's got the right trends he's betting on. He's linking his human and financial capital to the trends. He's doing the right things. So what else? I know tomorrow there's an interview I'm having with Dylan Patel. He is the captain behind Semi-Analysis, which is an acclaimed newsletter covering all things semiconductors. This is really dense stuff. I've been spending my nights and weekends going through it because I believe the next 10x opportunities will be in the semi space. There'll also be in other categories too, but if you believe that electronification continues, if you believe that AI adoption continues, if you believe robots are coming, if you believe automation is happening, then semiconductors are the right sector to focus on. And so I'm really excited to dig in there. These guys are 5 cuts deeper than anything I've seen, including from the buy side or sell side research that we have access to. So thrilled to be doing that with Meltem, who's also been focused on the semiconductor thesis as well. So that'll be a joint conversation. I believe it's tomorrow at 2 p.m. It'll be live.
I was just going to ask if that's going to be live because I am excited to hear that conversation. I'm really interested in the ideas around compute and energy and semiconductors, given the demands that we as a society are going to continue to put on that space.
Exactly. 2 p.m. Eastern confirmed. Just checked the calendar. Shall we call it a wrap? Anything else, Justin?
No, I think that's great. Let's tune in tomorrow at 2 p.m. to hear that conversation.
Check out the Lumida Legacy podcast as well around tax and estate. All right. Take care, folks. Yes.